Hello again, everyone. We are very excited to have for this session two experts in the high risk category of online prescription medicine. And I see people are streaming in from the other session, so I'm going to do a quick little intro. And before I do, I'm going to just remind people to put any questions you have in the Q&A button. And our experts today will be addressing them throughout. So if you have any questions at all, they will be happy to answer them. Just put them in the Q&A and we will be fielding that for you. So welcome everyone. For this session, we have these amazing experts. We have Neve Lewis, who's Vice President of Compliance Operations at G2 Risk Solutions. And she is a recognized thought leader in regulatory payments, in scams, and in the illicit online sale of drugs. That sounds like she's an expert at selling drugs online illicitly, but that's not actually what that is. So you may have seen her at various speaking engagements. She has spoken at APP and is on the board there, I believe, Neve, right? And so we're very excited to have her with us today. We are also very excited that Neve is joined by Justin Macy, who is the Director of Innovation at the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. Justin is an expert in pharmacy practice and digital health regulation, whose work bridges law, technology, and healthcare. And he is also a very sought after speaker. And we're just very excited that you all are giving us your time today. In this session, Neve and Justin will explore the latest threats in healthcare related e-commerce, connecting the dots between what's happening today to what may happen tomorrow so that you can protect your platform now and in the future. So take it away, both of you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us. By way of background, before Justin gets into the agenda, in addition to being VP of Compliance Operations for G2RS, I am a food, drug, and pharmacy lawyer with a background on how these things are sold online. And Justin trumps me because he is both a pharmacist and a lawyer. So if there's ever something I don't know, I go to Justin. So I'm delighted to be presenting with him today.
And I'm happy to give a little background on NAAP as well. We're the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. That essentially, we are a nonprofit that works for the state regulators in the U.S. as well as the Canadian provinces and a few other jurisdictions as well. So we're not a for-profit company. We don't work for any specific industry. The regulators are our customers. So with that, we'll jump to the agenda.
Sounds good.
So today we didn't want to do kind of the same boring conversations we've done for years. In case you've seen them, they weren't boring, they were amazing, but we've done them for a very long period of time on illegal online pharmacies and things like that. We wanted to look at scenarios right now that are high impact trends, whether that's a scenario where it's going to cause a very big problem or a scenario that's happening very commonly. And so we've picked 3 topics here today, but you won't find your traditional internet pharmacy issues. Those are still a problem, but they're not going to be the topic for today. So we're going to get to this first one, biohack beauty. And the idea here is these are all scenarios where, for one reason or another, someone's trying to look better or appear more attractive, and there's some clear risks that exist in this place. We really can't have this conversation without talking about GLP-1 agonists. So that's Wegovy, Zepbound, tirzepatide, semaglutide, retatrutide, Ozempic. Thank you. Mounjaro. It's that category of drugs. There's a few oral ones as well that are less common, but they're a big deal. And they're a big deal because they are the new Viagra. If we think about blockbuster drugs, this is going to be is bigger in scaling more than Viagra has historically. And Viagra was a blockbuster drug. It created online pharmacies as we know them today. It has impacts in lots of different ways that are unanticipated and unexpected. Right now, there's an estimate about 12% of all U.S. adults are using some type of GLP-1 drug. Experts are forecasting that annual global sales are going to hit 150 billion by the early 2030s. That's probably under now. That's an older forecast. And we know that over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, there's going to be many more formulations for these drugs that could be more effective and are going to likely be oral. And as they become oral and no longer injectable, or at least predominantly injectable, we're going to see them occur a lot more, generally speaking, online and other places for all sorts of kind of logistic reasons. Important to talk about when we talk about GLP-1s is the vast, not necessarily the majority, but many, many consumers are paying out of pocket for these. They're utilizing, especially online, and they're utilizing subscription models to make these purchases. The drugs cost over about $1,000 a month and are typically
In the US.
in the US, yes. In other jurisdictions, much less. What I would say overall is that's even in other jurisdictions, you are seeing those still as out-of-pocket payments, and they're happening because it may not be covered by an insurance, it may not be covered by a national healthcare plan, whatever kind of the cause is. You are still seeing this globally as online sales, and that's important context for what we're about to discuss, because this product and this category of products alone has kind of created a new supply chain or a new delivery model for prescription drugs from these kind of beauty areas to patients. And I say that because GLP-1s aren't necessarily the issue or problem. It's the businesses and supply and consumer engagement and interactions they've actually caused. And so there's a couple non-traditional models that we're going to talk about, non-traditional dispenser models. And by dispenser, I mean someone who gives a human being a prescription drug for them to take. Specifically, direct-to-consumer telemedicine models that both flourished under COVID and now have kind of turned over into the space. You've got research chemical peptide websites that we'll talk about a little bit as well. You also have compounding products. These drugs were under shortage, and in the US, that meant they were allowed to be manufactured by pharmacies instead of being the commercially available product, as well as kind of
Med spas?
Med spas, any entity or location. And a med spa is a little bit of a weird thing. I don't know if they are globally representative, but ultimately think about it as like a specialized medical practice for beautification. But they are so common in different parts of the US specifically, or in different areas, that they're like in like retail strip malls and things like that. They're very retail facing. So first, when we think about these non-traditional dispensers, we'll talk about med spas. You're actually seeing a lot more criminal prosecution in general. These are definitely ramping up. They're doing a lot more dispensing. Historically, they've done more contouring or administering of Botox in person. Now they're doing actually more dispensing. Patients are coming in and getting refills and things like that. As we've seen that occur, you're definitely seeing some pretty significant patient interactions. You've had patients that have bought drugs and from them or procured drugs from them, and they're just not using the traditional supply chain that's regulated heavily by medicines agencies. And because of that, you're seeing kind of people go to jail and the companies shut down. When we think about your traditional healthcare practitioner being regulated in these instances, you often are seeing scenarios where they're going and taking licenses away. I can think of one state, for example, that's done several hundred inspections, and on med spas specifically because they're within their jurisdiction and remit. And of those inspections, you're seeing scenarios where 50% of people are getting some sort of non-compliance, which is a really high rate. But more importantly, more than like 10% of people are losing their licenses over this. And that's kind of a wild figure. If you thought, hey, 1 in 10 cardiologists tomorrow are going to lose their license to practice, that's a game-changing kind of component. And because of that, those companies and their clinics are going bankrupt. They're shutting down. They're on subscription models. There's going to be chargebacks. There's reasons this will have a larger impact than what you've previously seen, where maybe somebody's license goes on probation and they have some some negative disciplinary action, or they pay a fine. This is going to have larger impacts for the payment space in general as a result. And then lastly here, I'm going to talk about kind of a novel approach that the US FDA has taken. There's a large White House initiative to go after prescription drug advertising. Normally, we would see that and say, okay, there's going to be a lot of outreach to manufacturers. After this occurred, the US FDA sent out about 80 warning letters. 3/4 of those went to compounders and telehealth companies. Those are typically not entities that fall within the prescription drug advertising rules in the US. And the US is an unusual beast already. There's only two countries that I know of that allow direct-to-consumer advertising for prescription drugs. But the FDA used this kind of White House initiative to go after things we wouldn't normally think of in that space. That's particularly important because although the Office of Criminal Investigations for the FDA is kind of a leader in internet pharmacy issues, the regulatory side that issued these usually doesn't kind of dabble in this space. And I suspect that eventually the home for these kind of actions is going to fall much more within the FTC's remit. And obviously, the FTC has a much closer relationship with the payment industry historically than the FDA's regulatory side does. So important trend there to watch to see how that plays out. These are all examples of what I would call like licensed entities behaving badly. Happy to talk about any of those in more detail if anyone has questions. We have an open Q&A platform as well. I'm now going to move on to some just illicit business models that are not kind of the licensed model doing something unwell. So we're going to talk about peptide merchants or research chemical merchants. And to do that, I need to give a little bit of historical background first. First and foremost, in most jurisdictions, definitely the US, but in most other jurisdictions that Neve and I have looked at over the years as well, most drugs are regulated based on their intended use, not based on what's necessarily in the bottle. And so if you intend to cure someone's cancer, you're a drug, irrespective of how you label your product. For those reasons, peptide merchants or these research chemical merchants usually put what are going to be either unapproved drugs or approved active pharmaceutical ingredients into what looks like a research vial, and they market themselves as not for human consumption and research purposes only, therefore trying to make the argument that they are not intending to cure, mitigate, treat disease, and therefore are not drugs and are unregulated. However, all of the statutes we've ever reviewed always go one step further and say it's based on your intent, not based on what you say necessarily. So overall, these merchants, because they're advertising to direct to consumers, because they're selling to consumers, because they have comments like things that say like, taking this helped my rat gain more a higher personal rep, right? Because they have things like that undercut their argument. This loophole doesn't really exist, but it's a little bit harder to prosecute. Likewise, this industry historically has catered very narrowly to the bodybuilder community. And so you kind of had to know, wink, wink, nod, nod, what the thing is that you were buying in order to purchase this. That hasn't, and so generally speaking, it's been under-enforced, right? Because the victims of these, the consumers, are also kind of willing participants in knowing what they're doing. And this is an example of it where you kind of have all these research chemicals on a website. Sticking to how GLP-1s have changed things, these research chemicals and peptide websites are now totally mainstream. They're advertising and taking advantage of social media platforms, and they're actually trying to pitch directly to consumers writ large, not narrowly tailored to that niche that existed. And that's because everybody wants GLP-1s, right? Huge market demand. And so now you're finding new ways and new avenues to sell these using that existing business channel that existed. And accordingly with that, you're also by definition seeing additional regulators come out of it and flagging it. And so this is an example of a state attorney general saying, hey, there's issues here, calling out platforms in addition in this conversation. And this isn't your traditional, medicines agency or pharmacy practice regulator. This is just straight up, traditional criminal elements that are going through and taking action here, criminal prosecutors who are taking action now. And so you're going to see this spiral in a different way, because not only is it going to cause bankruptcy or just like a license suspension will, it's also going to result in asset forfeiture and third-party subpoenas and other additional components like that as things like this move forward. And we expect to see more of this, not less. With that, I'll turn it over to Neve.
Sounds good. Okay, we are now going to talk about the world of high-risk supplements. Before we move on to the next slide, we should start by clarifying that we are going to use the word nutraceutical and supplement in the next several slides. Nutraceutical is really just an industry term for a dietary supplement, a food supplement, a health supplement. Different regulators call them different things. Nutraceutical is not, it's also commonly used in the payments industry. It's not actually a regulatory term. The industry uses it because it sounds like pharmaceutical, so it sounds like it does something amazing for you, but they're synonyms. And we sometimes get asked, so since I'm using them interchangeably, I want to make that clear. So the highest risk type of supplement is probably your tainted supplement. So before we start giving examples, let's talk about what is a tainted supplement. It is a product that is labeled as a dietary supplement, but it actually contains hidden ingredients that are not on the label. These are usually prescription drug ingredients, but it could be dangerous botanicals. Just this past week, the US FDA flagged a bunch of supplements that contained yellow oleander, which is deadly, or it could even be lead, right? Most commonly, though, it's prescription drug ingredients. So why are people buying these? Why are people manufacturing these? Again, this is just sort of background information. Well, they do it because these products sell, right? People think they are taking a natural, sexual enhancement supplement, and sexual enhancement supplements are sort of the biggest category here, but you also see weight loss and you also see bodybuilding, but sexual enhancement is the biggest category. They think they're taking something natural, but they're actually taking a product that has, say, twice the amount of Viagra as real Viagra, right? So these products work, and people are taking them, and people are buying them. So around the world, regulators are testing these products. The most common warnings about these products come from the regulators on your screen: the US FDA, Health Canada, Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, Singapore's Health Sciences Authority, but there are dozens of others. And the example on the screen and this next example, which I will let Justin click to, both come from just this past month from the US FDA, just October. And those are two of the products that the FDA flagged in October, but there are actually 7 tainted products, tainted supplements flagged by the FDA just in the month of October. And they flagged another 8 in September, right? And that is just one regulator, one country. But of course, if these products are being sold across borders, they're problematic everywhere. They're tainted everywhere. They're dangerous everywhere. The card brands are taking a closer look at this because this goes straight to consumer safety, right? These products can contain several prescription drug ingredients and sometimes 3 or 4 or more times the amount of the ingredient that is in a prescription-only drug, right? So the black tie honey product that was on the last image, it contains sildenafil, which is Viagra, tadalafil, which is Cialis, and diclofenac, which is an anti-inflammatory drug, right? The people who are taking these have no idea that they are taking something that contains these prescription drug ingredients.
And could already be taking the same prescription drug ingredient from a prescription they already have. Yes,
they could. So many tainted supplements are sold on websites that are mostly selling unproblematic products. There might be a handful of products that are offered by like a third-party seller on a massive marketplace that sells tens or hundreds of thousands of non-problematic goods. There might be one tainted supplement being sold on like an adult toy website that's mostly selling adult toys that might be within your risk tolerance. You don't know that there's also a tainted supplement there. But then you have your websites that focus pretty much entirely on tainted products, and that's what we're going to talk about on this screen. The classic example is on the screen. Nope, back, Justin.
Sorry.
That's okay. The classic example is on the screen is VIP Royal Honey. It is a sexual enhancement supplement that commonly is tainted with, right, undeclared, sildenafil or tadalafil, like I said, Viagra or Cialis. It's super popular. VIP Royal Honey is super popular. Apparently, there is a viral TikTok about that college kids and Gen Z are taking this product. They refer to them as honey packs. I checked on sort of domain name usage, and there are 103 taken domain names, so websites that just use the term honey pack in the domain name. So these types of merchants are selling just VIP Royal Honey, and they are doing it from the payments industry perspective through transaction laundering. However, they're also being sold on these adult toy merchants and in marketplaces. So if you have one of those merchants in your portfolio, you want to look out for references to things like performance honey, right? Honey shouldn't be performing. It should be sweet and delicious. Then we're going to move on to tainted supplements that avoid detection by constantly rebranding. The Rhino family of products that are on your screen, they've been on regulators' radar for almost 20 years, right? There are 45 different versions of rhino products that have been tested solely by the US FDA. We're not even talking like Australia. The first one was tested way back in 2007, and the most recently tested version of rhino was at the end of last year, so less than a year ago. And it is still all over the internet. Every time enforcement hits, a specific product will disappear and then it will reappear under a new name. So, what should you be looking for telltale signs? You should be looking for single pill packaging like you see on the screen. Whoever's making these loves their slogan, which is time, size, stamina. It's on pretty much every product. And again, they use names other than Rhino. They have a whole family of Zen products, Miracle Zen, Power Zen, Premier Zen. So for acquirers and digital commerce companies, this isn't a product issue. You shouldn't be worried about the specific products. It's a pattern recognition problem. So moving on from tainted products to products that actually declare what is in them, we are now looking at supplements that contain unapproved drug ingredients that are actually on the label. So as background, supplements are called dietary supplements because they are supposed to, it's very literal, they're supposed to supplement the diet. All over the world, they are regulated as a subcategory of food. They can contain things like vitamins, minerals, herbs, other botanicals, amino acids, things like that. They should not contain, with very rare exceptions, drug ingredients. What we are seeing is bad actors, the same types of folks who are selling peptides, sell the same or similar ingredients in supplements. The most popular ones out there today are the ones on your screen, BPC 157, TB4. Basically, they are trying to sneak drugs into the market by labeling them as supplements, the same way they were trying to sneak them into the market by labeling them as research chemicals. Some countries do a more proactive job of adding them to sort of prescription drug lists. BPC 157 and TB4 are already Schedule 4 prescription-only drugs in Australia.
And we expect there's going to be more of this, right? Because ultimately, if you think about mainstreaming the research chemical websites, well, how do you broaden that to a different channel, the same ingredients? Well, you can take the same old research chemical ingredients, put them into supplements, and reach newer audiences.
Okay, so we are moving on to sort of cross-border issues, right? So what is perfectly legal in one jurisdiction can be a controlled substance or a prescription-only drug in another jurisdiction. So sort of the most extreme example that I can think of is DHEA, which you can buy over the counter in the United States as a dietary supplement. It is definitely a legal supplement and very common in the US, but it is a controlled substance in many countries, including the 4 on the screen, but there's lots of other ones. And this is a big deal from an enforcement perspective. So I'm not talking about DEA specifically here, but I'm talking about the difference between prescription drugs and controlled substances. If I were to go through customs to a different country with an ingredient that is a prescription-only drug in that country, it might get confiscated, right? They might be like, you know what, you can't have this unless you have your prescription with you, right? If I go through customs with controlled substance, I could get taken away in handcuffs, right? So controlled substances are heavily regulated. And separately from that, it's a controlled substance in a bunch of countries. So that should give folks who live in the US like a serious moment of pause. There are lots of ingredients like this. Not all are controlled substances, but there are lots of ingredients that require prescription in other countries, but are common supplement ingredients in the US. Rauwolfia, yohimbine, and really probably the most popular one is melatonin. And so that is why it is critical for payment providers and marketplaces to know where they are shipping. You want to restrict sales to jurisdictions where these products are allowed to be sold. You also, for the payments industry, want to be wary of large supplement websites, merchants that offer worldwide shipping, no restrictions, tons and tons of supplements, right? There is probably an ingredient there that is restricted for sale in some country. So moving on to the EU, in the EU, supplements cannot include ingredients that were not in the sort of in the marketplace in the EU, used commonly in the EU prior to 1997. That was when the initial novel foods regulation went into place. So you've got newer ingredients like the ones on the screen, Hoodia, DMAE, 5-HTP. They have to go through safety assessments before they can be sold in food. Doesn't mean that they're prohibited forever, just means if it's a novel food, it can't be sold until that safety assessment has happened. But we still see these ingredients being sold in cross-border sales, particularly again from US-based merchants. Justin, I know you want to chime in on why I'm so frequently commenting on US-based merchants.
Yeah, so of course, like the U.S. makes the most supplements, and that's because the U.S. supplement industry is highly unregulated comparatively to other jurisdictions. Drugs, other things like that, the U.S. has lots of regulations, but the supplement industry, not so much. The other thing I'll flag there is we're also huge consumers of supplements, and so we export a lot of them, but we don't necessarily follow the U.S. supplement industry doesn't follow the laws of other jurisdictions, and that's where we end up in the problems.
So here the problem isn't the product itself necessarily. It is the mismatch between where it's legal and where the merchant is offering shipping. And I will go quickly into the next one, which is now we're not talking about novel foods, which may not be okay today, but could be okay tomorrow if there's a safety assessment. Now we're talking about two ingredients that are just prohibited in the EU in food products. And these are yohimbe and ephedra. Yohimbe is commonly sold as a sexual enhancement supplement. I feel like I'm talking a lot about sexual enhancement supplements. It's also sold for weight loss. Ephedra is sold for weight loss, increased energy, as a pre-workout. But supplements containing these ingredients still turn up on e-commerce sites all the time, particularly yohimbe, which is just in a ton of supplements. So moving on to gas station highs, or if you are not in the US, we'll call them petrol station highs. These are products that skirt drug laws and deliver psychoactive effects, right? That's our sort of made up category. This is a very fast moving category. New compounds appear online, are popular sort of at least every year. They are cheap. They are easy to ship. They are very commonly found online, at least the ones we're talking about, and in places like convenience stores, gas stations, or petrol stations. Hence, that's why we gave them the name. This makes them accessible to kids, accessible to teens, which poses a greater risk for the seller because regulators worldwide care about underage. They care about vulnerable populations. So a really good example, really hot topic right now is 7-hydroxymitragynine, which is more commonly known as 7-OH. It is an alkaloid found in kratom. According to the US FDA, it is 13 times more potent than morphine, causes sedation, mood elevation, euphoria, depending on your dosage. It is already controlled as a controlled substance in a bunch of countries, including the ones you see on your screen. And now the US FDA is recommending it be added to the Controlled Substance Act. That's a big deal. That's not something they do every day. It's like pretty rare. And they've announced it because they are worried that it is going to be the cause of the next opioid epidemic, right? And they should be worried because, to be clear, it is, at least in the United States, everywhere. It's in gas stations, convenience stores. It's especially available online. I first learned about it well before it was in the news from my college-age son saying he was debating with friends whether or not it was legal, right? So it's everywhere. Now that the payments industry and digital commerce companies are cracking down on this, which they very much are, you want to look out for euphemisms, things like kratom extract or enhanced kratom, right? These are the kinds of terms that may indicate that the merchant's actually selling 7-OH. So moving on to nitrous oxide, you've probably seen little silver canisters sold online. They're sold in retail stores. They're known as whippets. People commonly, why are people buying it? How do people use it? People use nitrous oxide by releasing gas from these little steel canisters into a balloon, then inhaling from the balloon, right? There are legitimate uses in food and medicine, but regulators are catching on to the abuse. Countries like Denmark and the UK now treat controlled offense for recreational nitrous oxide sales. This is a good example of a lawful product turning risky through, again, intent and marketing. So like, what should you look out for? Merchants that are selling balloons bundled with nitrous oxide purportedly for food manufacturing processes, right? There's absolutely no reason it should be bundled with balloons. That, again, is not typical for a legitimate food service supply company. Similarly, how research chemical companies don't typically have buy one, get one Instagram sales, right? Moving on to a particular product, the Feel Free product. In 2023, the US FDA and US Marshals seized nearly 250,000 bottles of this product. It contains a mixture of kava, which is restricted in food and supplements in a bunch of countries. Justin, you want to click? It contains kratom. It contains 7-OH. And even after the seizure, the product is still available online, right? And that persistence shows that these merchants can maybe disappear for a period of time. Maybe they just stay. They can bounce in and out of the payments ecosystem. We have two more, and I'll do them quick. Another fast growing area is psychoactive mushrooms, not shrooms, not your psilocybe mushrooms, but the one we're going to focus on right now is Amanita muscaria. It's being sold as gummies. It's being sold as chocolate. It's advertised with terms like relaxation, microdosing. It contains a compound that is a controlled substance in Australia and not permitted for human use in Louisiana, but online sellers are treating like it's totally legal everywhere. You should look out for terms like Amanita or muscimol, legal shrooms, microdosing chocolates, relaxation chocolate, sleep chocolate, especially where there's psychedelic imagery. You should look out for that. And last but not least, tianeptine is a prescription-only antidepressant drug with strong dependence potential, commonly sold as a supplement. It is prohibited, but still sold sort of everywhere online. We see in the payment side, we see merchants jump between acquirers as soon as there's enforcement. There are popular brand names out there like Tiana Red, Tiana Green, Zaza Red. And it is the original gas station heroin, which is where we got our title from. That is what the FDA referred to it as. So across all of these examples, you are right. Across all of these examples, you're doing a great job, Justin. One common thread, there's probably other common threads, but one thread is, hey, risk can move quickly from the margins into the mainstream. Something becomes super popular, maybe back into the margins again as regulators start to take action. Payment companies, digital commerce companies, they're on the front lines, right? They see these merchants before regulators do, which means that they have the power to cut off access and protect consumers. They also, as legitimate third-party intermediaries, sometimes take the brunt when regulators do take action. I don't know if we have time for questions, but thank you very much for your time.
We always have time for questions. That was amazing. I joined. Excellent presentation. Thank you for that. I think you hit on some really problematic areas that I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion. And when there's confusion, there's opportunity for people to separate us and bad actors to come online and harm consumers. We have a couple of questions in the box. If anybody wants to add more, feel free. We have a couple of minutes with some pretty awesome experts. So let's touch on this one. Is there any information that can be shared on how social media platforms are responding to the sale and the advertising of research purpose only peptides?
Justin, do you have a comment on that? I would say I've seen an increase, honestly, if anything, on the advertising.
I've seen an increase as well. I also have definitely seen or heard that there is a desire for regulators to take more enforcement against it, and that is the next step in that evolution of things. What things those are specifically, I think is going to be the open question. How do you do it? As we've talked about previously, research chemicals and peptide websites to take advantage of this kind of loophole scenario. So it's always a little bit trickier prosecuting those scenarios. I think it's a little bit trickier for the same reasons on a social media company that may not have all those details, and you have to make that argument. But I think it's being explored. I'd be surprised if it wasn't.
Okay, and when you say regulator, what avenue do you think it's going to come in from?
I would expect it to come from the medicines agencies.
Okay.
So in the US, I'm guessing the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. Is that what you're guessing, Justin?
That's what I would guess, yes.
Okay, perfect. We have another question, one moment. Oh, Keisha says, not a question, but I truly enjoyed this presentation, and thank you.
Aw.
Another question. I've seen a massive uptick in Nutra merchants adding BPC 157 to their website. Why do you think products like BPC 157 and TB4 have become so popular despite regulatory restrictions?
So what I would say is, and maybe I'm being naive here, which after all this time in the industry, I would like to think I'm not, but I'm wondering if the merchants know these products are problematic, right? BPC 157 is super popular. Social media has made it more popular. I love me some TikTok. I see lots of BPC 157 being advertised on TikTok as a great thing for anti-aging. It stands for body protection compound, right? And so I'm not 100% sure that the merchants even know, right? Like a lot of what we see from the G2 Risk Solutions perspective is merchants that sell a bunch of supplements, and then they sell BPC 157 as one of those. I've even seen them on like physician websites where they have like a supplement store. Most of those supplements are things like magnesium or vitamins or, whatever, some sort of combination of various sort of inoffensive herbs. And then they'll sell BPC 157, right? Justin, do you have a more cynical take?
Of course. But no, I would say, yeah, I think that this goes along with that mainstreaming too of the peptide websites. As soon as you have peptide websites that are selling these products mainstream and are being sold and like more showing up in the conscious of regular folks and not necessarily their prior narrow clientele. The next question is how do you put this in more places? How do you sell it? Obviously somebody else is selling it. How do I do it bigger, better? And so I think that there's also just a level of surfacing it via that panel, that process as well.
So essentially we're back in the what is old is new. So this is just the evolution of I think the origination story is probably acai in the website ecosystem. And then it's just been a naming convention ever since.
Right. It's always a hot topic, right? There's always a Garcinia and acai, whatever. There's always something that people think is going to be the next, potion. Yes.
Yeah. I was truly horrified by the deer antler phase. I didn't get that one at all. I always like to try and give the consumer the benefit of the doubt, but when that one took off,
they're velvet deer antlers.
and wonderful, yeah. I was like, I've just lost all faith in humanity at that point when the deer antler fluff took off. Excellent. Closing thought. What do you want people to recognize from your presentation? What action can we take?
Justin, do you have one?
Yeah, so I would say the importance is really understanding and appreciating the merchants that are in these spaces that traditionally may have been like super legal, not high risk, and that's kind of that non-traditional dispenser model. You're going to see more things there than you previously expected. You may have underwritten them 10 years ago when they were just doing some basic face peels and that kind of stuff. You're in a different ballgame now if they've gotten into dispensing GLP-1s that are coming from nefarious sources.
Yeah. And I would say that from the supplement side, your tainted supplements, they're hard to catch. They're a needle in a haystack, and yet they are everywhere. So you want to do your due diligence on if you are, like I said, if you're comfortable with adult toy merchants, do they have a supplement side, right? If you're comfortable with supplement merchants, where are they shipping? I would say sort of the biggest trend that we've seen from a payment side is where are people shipping, right? Products that are legal in country X or jurisdiction X may not be legal in country Y, and they may be very illegal, right? Like your DHEA example.
Awesome. Excellent feedback. I appreciate that. Reevaluate your merchant portfolio, period. You should be doing this anyway, but certainly in these verticals where they could be infiltrating, the risks are legitimate and there's catastrophic human implications to this. Buyer seller jurisdiction. It's a foundational element to what we need to be concerned about, certainly this vertical. You are awesome speakers. You're awesome to watch present. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to everyone who joined. Please jump over to the next session and have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.